Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Henry Gayden, a screenwriter whose credits include the FearNet series Zombie Roadkill, the charming found-footage sci-fi movie Earth to Echo, and some little picture coming out this week called Shazam. I don't know, you probably haven't heard of it. We recorded this a little over a year ago when the film was shooting in Toronto, and I'm delighted to finally be able to share it. Henry picked L.A. Story, the 1991 comedy in which writer, producer, and star Steve Martin married magic realist romance and silly Southern Californian superficiality for a truly lovely little film. A story about a Los Angeles weatherman named Harris Telemacher who has a good job, a comfortable life, and a nagging sense that his life isn't quite what it should be. And that's exactly when a highway road sign starts offering him advice. Steve Martin had already established himself as a deft romantic lead with Roxanne a few years earlier, but this was a bigger swing, putting himself opposite his real-life partner, Victoria Tennant, and inviting a wonderfully eclectic cast including Sarah Jessica Parker, Richard E. Grant, Mary Lou Hanner, Kevin Pollak, Iman, and plenty of others, to tell a story with real feeling rather than the default irony in which so many comedies cloak themselves. It's a charmer, and while it's sort of been rediscovered since we recorded this episode, it hasn't been rediscovered enough. So I'm glad that we got the chance to talk about it. We also somehow ended up discussing kaiju movies, and Dexter got fussy at one point, but that's the show. This is Someone Else's Movie.
It's the first movie I chose as my own in a formative age, and so it's traveled with me through kind of every age, and it's been very kind of important and informing how I view the world and also how I approach writing. But what was interesting is that, like, strangely enough, I guess I've reached a point where I don't need to refer to the movies that have meant something to me in a long time. So I haven't watched it in more than a decade at this point.
Oh, wow. And
I rewatched it, and I was like, some of these some of this hasn't aged well. And there were always some jokes that I never liked, even as a 12-year-old.
Okay.
Like the Mozart's balls jokes. Did you watch it?
Not recently.
Okay.
I think the last time I saw it would have been about 3 years ago.
That's close enough.
I've been so neck deep in hot docs and stuff that I haven't had time to
watch
anything for pleasure or research.
Well, no, it's but there's just some jokes that fall flat.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it really vividly, which was refreshing. It's all still in here.
Yeah.
The feeling that I remember, I was seeing it theatrically. I would have been 1990. I would have been 22.
Yeah, 91, I think. Yeah,
91. Okay, yeah. I remember it feeling like a first novel. Like it's just got this. I was surprised that Martin didn't direct it himself. I'm still surprised he doesn't.
I had to look up some things about that because I was surprised about what I found. Because for years, until today, I had always assumed he kind of tombstoned it. Yeah. Where he controlled the director. And he may have to an extent, but Mick Jackson, who's a fascinating figure in his own right.
Yeah, he made Threads. He got the guy who made Threads to make a delicate Los Angeles romantic fantasy.
I understand why you get him to make Volcano.
Yeah.
Or
Chattahoochee even, which was his first American-ish movie.
Right, the prison movie, right?
Yeah, with Gary Oldman and Dennis Hopper. And then to go to this, it's just... That strikes me as something that Steve Martin would do, like a very perverse decision to get this filmmaker to make his movie.
Well, yeah, so I can just jump right into the very little research I have, because there's not much on this movie. And I've over the years read a few things about it, but it's hard to find because not many people talk about it. But, so he was married to Victoria Tennant at the time. This was kind of a love letter to her, his wife. Yeah. They divorced 3 years later. Never mind that. Lovely gesture. I think he wrote it over the period of 6 to 8 years, off and on between jobs. And his wife always had an interesting perspective on LA as a sort of an English woman. Mm-hmm. And so he wanted a perspective of someone English. So that is honestly what brought him to Mick Jackson.
Okay.
Is he was English. And he wanted he just wanted a different perspective. And so I think, and what was this quote? I'll just give the quote.
Yeah, sure.
So in the interview, all that stuff, all the sort of lovely, you could argue, sentimental, but I love the touches with the Enya music and the montages, and when they turn to children and are walking through that garden, which is maybe my favorite moment. All that was Mick Jackson.
Really?
Yeah, like that he brought this idea of trying to visualize love without words. And so he brought these moments that are, for lack of a better word, kind of montages in the middle of the movie. And then all the little weird touches of porcelain, cougars in the middle of trees and all the strange things. That was all sort of him bringing his own kind of foreigner's eye of L.A., which is why Steve Martin hired him. And Steve Martin gave him all the credit for doing that he said the script was just his dialogue and those scenes and kind of the poetry, the visual poetry of the movie, which is half the movie to me, was Mick Jackson, which I never would have given him credit for.
Yeah, nor would I. It's because his films are not especially visually distinguished.
No.
I mean, Threads has its own look.
Yeah.
But, Jackson's not somebody I immediately associate with like daring visual choices.
No.
And the general tone of LA Story and most of Martin's scripts, there's always a sort of a cinematic self-awareness. Either they're genre pastiches or they're deliberately commenting on Hollywood, stuff like Bowfinger and even...
Yeah, but even Bowfinger's which I really like, is doesn't, like, whatever third dimension that LA Story has, Bowfinger does not.
Yeah, no, it uses its magic realism with twins and stuff and jokiness, but it's not.
Yeah.
And the jokes are within the context of movie making. It's all very insidery. LA Story is... Yeah, LA Story is not about Hollywood. It's about Los Angeles, which is a different culture and
Sure.
And at the time, too, just sort of a... It's twinned in my mind forever because Martin's in both films with Grand Canyon.
Which I think is awful.
Yeah?
I do.
But people have turned on Grand Canyon something fierce.
Well, it's because it's too earnest.
Yeah, but so is LA Story, but it doesn't read in a bad way, right? The earnestness feels pure.
Well, I'm very earnest, but LA Story cuts it. It really cuts the earnestness with, like even in the montages, like he's doing something kind of funny, and this while Enya's playing, it's very serious Enya music, and sort of this Koyaanisqatsi, like imagery, and then you're cutting to him kind of like picking his nose for a second, like. But I don't know, there's something in those moments that that the movie never feels like it's taking itself too seriously, whereas Grand Canyon feels to me like it's trying to be the great novel of its time.
Yeah, maybe that's it. It's first novel versus like self-conscious treatise.
Right.
Novel.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Grand Canyon because so much of it is show don't tell, and in a really insistent way.
So you love it. You really do like that movie. I really love it.
I haven't seen it in a while, I have to admit. But I have seen it I saw it a couple of times. The last time I saw it would have been, I guess, when the Blu-ray came out.
Okay, so recently.
Yeah. 5 years at the most.
Yeah.
And it's trying to get to something.
It is.
And it evades... Like it evades it. The thing eludes it, which is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But Kasten, I ran into him once when he was at TIFF with Mumford, and we chatted about.
I
Grand
like
Canyon.
Mumford.
Yeah, Mumford's fine.
Mumford's a nice movie.
It's a sweet little.
No one talks about the movie.
No, yeah, but Grand Canyon is the kind of thing where it's like he swings for the fences. He wants to say something, and he doesn't quite articulate it.
No,
but. There's something in Kevin Kline's sadness. For me, it feels like it's teeing up American Beauty, but it doesn't know it. And I think that's the continuum that it's operating in.
But American Beauty, I would say, why that movie works. I still think it works. Some people are turning on that movie too.
Sure, yeah.
But that movie works because it's got nastiness and humor.
Yeah,
and Grand Canyon has none of those.
It's very earnest. It's got one laugh, which is Alfre Woodard turning to Danny Glover and saying, "Do you think we're the only two black people who knows?" And it's a great line.
Right, yeah.
But I still, like, what is that, 25 years later, that still kind of feels like, then it felt knowing, and now it feels like, oh, a white guy wrote that line. It just
totally,
it feels tone deaf to itself. But he was trying to make a comment on the moment, and it didn't quite land. I don't know. I find it fascinating. But with LA Story...
Well, I feel... Well, can you just go on Grand Canyon for a second? And by the way, in this interview, he says that he told Kasten that it was LA Story, The Dark Side.
Yeah. They're very much mirror images of each other.
But I find Grand Canyon the like equivalent of being cornered at a party by like a recent like philosophy grad, like and who takes himself so seriously. I love Lawrence Kasdan. It felt like it was too much for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
it was his one shot at making a movie that's about something, like about capital something.
But that's the problem. Whenever you do that, you fail. I don't know.
Yeah. No, grand statements are hard.
Never start out with that idea. They got nominated for an Oscar at the time. People loved the movie at the time.
Yeah.
And I just, since it's aged very badly.
Yeah. And whereas LA Story feels timeless in a weird way. Just because even though like the Enya music should date it more than anything else.
Sure.
It doesn't. Like it feels, when that moment lands, I remember seeing it in a big theater with a big crowd and everybody just going, oh, like we all got it. We all got what it was intended to do.
Yeah.
And until now, I would have credited Martin with it because when...
And by the way, he could just be very giving in this interview, you know? And if you interviewed him now, he might be like, oh, that was me. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd love to find out. But it like when at the time, in his books, in his comedy, when he went for emotion, it was earned. Like he would save it up. So much of his stuff was... not cynical exactly, but there was a veneer of performance. He was all like his stand-up was all based on the audience understanding what the character is doing, and that extends into a lot of his performances. Like All of Me is a masterclass in, finding angles on, like depending on the angle you're watching him from, you can see a different person.
Yeah,
and it's incredible.
Yeah,
and with LA Story, you just get the sense that he's made a movie about someone who feels like Steve Martin must feel, like successful but lost and lonely, and this is probably how he felt before he fell in love. And then you make a movie about falling in love, and it's just like, oh yeah, okay, you've been thinking about this.
Yeah, I mean, he even says it's not even a story about LA; it's a story about love to him, which is why I love that movie. Because when I found that movie at age like 11, which is a strange movie to cotton to at 11. I'd never been to LA. I didn't know what LA was. And I didn't watch that movie going, like, pointing my finger at the screen and going, haha, LA is so silly. Like, it wasn't about that. It was something about it that got to, like, my heart, as a little kid, Yeah.
Well, if the story is about love, then it has to be about authenticity. And if you're making a movie about Los Angeles as an inauthentic place where a real emotion is like striking people,
perfectly said,
you can totally relate to that.
Yeah,
right? Like I didn't go to Los Angeles until the next year. My first trip was in '92.
Yeah,
I did a bunch of junkets that year.
And then movie works for people who don't even know Los Angeles.
Yeah, you just know that that's where people are posturing and being fun.
But we're all doing that in some ways.
Yeah, exactly. And
some heightened version of that.
Yeah, I've said this on the podcast a number of times. I'm sure it's like my kryptonite is movies about smart people who are blindsided by their own hearts, but people who think they can intellectualize everything and then...
Well, give me an example.
The Sure Thing is actually a really good one from around the same era.
Okay.
Yeah, just because...
So that's what really can hit you hard?
Well, just watching people stumble through emotion. And, it doesn't have to be a love story. Sometimes it can be a story about people confronting their own mortality, but just generally, I spend so much time in my head professionally that and judging my responses to things, like just watching Rampage is like, I'm really enjoying this. Is that right? Am I is this pulling on my video game brain from when I was a kid and liked Rampage, or is this actually, am I appreciating the artistry that has put together this movie? And it's like, oh, I finally realized, no, this is the movie that, like, I love Gareth Edwards' Godzilla.
Did you?
Yeah.
I did not.
See?
Okay.
Rampage is a movie, because I love the idea of a mythic Godzilla film, because that's always been...
I do too.
My interpretation of it, right? Like that he is an elemental force. It's in the Toho films, but it never really was articulated that well, because they're always just pointing at children, really. But the first one, King of the Monsters, the original Gojira, he is the world smacking back at us.
Right.
And so this thing, the idea that he's sort of the world's antibody who shows up to beat real threats, and that we can only really see him through that prism, and so the movie is kind of missing him a lot, and just that huge smackdown sequence at the 1 hour mark, which is immediately like that elemental roar, and then we cut to him TV set, and people were like, I want to see the monster punch the monster. And it's like, that happens all the time. Rampage is a movie for that. Rampage is the daylight, monsters punching each other, people running around with carnage. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But it is completely like earthbound.
Okay.
And it doesn't try to pull on that Malick string that Edwards was chasing, which I just thought was such a really but
no
character way into it.
No characters I cared about. Didn't know what character was the main character.
See, I didn't mind that because my other
just the
theory,
atmosphere of the monster.
Yeah, well, my other theory of Godzilla is it's in Cloverfield, which is that when the monster shows up, you're dead. Like you just run. That's all humans can do. We can maybe help, but only if we understand what's going on. And so, when Taylor Johnson takes the bomb out, or burns down the eggs, that's his function. And he's really just like contributing as little as he can, what little he can to this monster.
Okay.
And I was totally fine with it.
Okay.
And then, Pacific Rim comes along, and that's just action figures and monsters and toys playing with each other.
Oh, that was worse. Yeah.
No,
I'm being terrible. I'm being a bummer. All right.
Oh, no. But that's my response to Rampage eventually clarified into, oh no, this is why I like it. It's because it's utterly unpretentious about what it's doing, and it's inventive, and it's got a couple of actors who are just clearly having fun with it, and also digital effects that look pretty good.
Right.
So I'm fine with it. But with LA Story, you have a character who is constantly questioning the world around him, even if it's only in a sort of a wry sense. He's not cynical exactly. He's
not running from it.
No, he's just in a bit of a rut, and he's successful but unfulfilled. And then he meets someone who completely resets his internal compass. And it turns out Steve Martin's really good at that. Just that inner struggle is great, and making him articulate. People said it was kind of a Woody Allen West Coast movie, which just because people talk a lot.
Yeah, I never really bought that either.
Yeah. And it's much warmer than a Woody Allen film. Like, it's really not afraid of...
It believes in this love. This sort of... I mean, even the statement he says, a kiss may not be the truth, but it is what we wish were true. Like, that statement, which is about the kiss not meaning something, is meaning something.
Yeah. It's just... It's so wide open in conversation with romance, not romantic comedies. Like, it is... It's the work of a guy who has spent a lot of time thinking about it and figured that maybe this is his one shot to say something meaningful. But he's not trying to make a grand cultural statement. He's just talking about people. And that's I think why
Which is what makes the grand... See, that's actually, to me, the difference between Grand Canyon. You make a grander statement by not trying to make a grand statement. So by just speaking in the micro, you can actually hit a very sort of macro statement. It's when you go for the big macro statement that you miss people.
Yeah.
Now you're just like, you're a New York Times op-ed.
Yeah, I've never spent any time thinking about, realistically I probably have, but just because of documentaries and stuff, but I've never spent any time thinking about race relations in 1990s pre-Rodney King Los Angeles, the way that Kasdan clearly wanted me to, but I've been in love. I've found someone. I mean, that's stuff that... it's dumb, right? But if you write a personal story, people will hook into it and it becomes universal.
Yeah.
The more specific you are about feelings, the more likely people are to recognize it. And he just nailed it. It's so sweet and winning, and it's just... And Tennant's great, too. It's... I don't want to put all of this on Steve Martin. The two of them together are really lovely.
When a lot of the things that she said, he put in the movie. Like, this is just a desert, and it's just a place of dreams that people, made out of sprinklers. He said he just put the words that she said about LA into her mouth as a character. I honestly, the thing to me that always really pulled me in is how... it's almost the miraculous thing to me about this movie is how much it believes in itself, and it's so earnestly open-hearted and also daffy. Like, it would seem like a schizophrenic film on paper. Like, it would not make any sense to me if you put what I saw on film onto paper, if those montages were written and Enya was put into the slug line. I would laugh at the audacity of trying to mix broad comedy with really heartfelt statements about love. And I think that dance and the fact that he executes it perfectly and makes me tear up somehow in a movie that also has jokes about like getting kicked in the nuts and roller skating through museums and does riffs on Shakespeare with Rick Moranis playing, you know, the Gravedigger. I mean, there's just so many ingredients mixed in there that really inspired me and also stuck with me for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, just mentioning Moranis, that's something else I was thinking about. Every time I watch it, there's another person in it who has become somebody famous.
Well, he was famous. They just did My Blue Heaven the year before, right?
Sure, yeah. Little Shop and
Little Shop, of course.
Like their fourth film together, but
it's actually he's closer to retirement than he was famous, but yeah.
But the casting, whoever cast it, I mean, Patrick Stewart is in it for
Richard E. Grant.
Richard E. Grant is just
Patrick Stewart's so great. I love that scene.
Yeah. Woody Harrelson, like there's all of these faces in it that I mean, I'm sure I would have recognized Stewart. Star Trek had been on for 3 or 4 years at the time, but it was just one of those things where it's like, is that Francis Farmer? What is Francis Farmer doing?
Yeah, I had
Fisher.
to look up.
Francis Fisher.
But Francis Farmer.
Strawberry Alice from Unforgiven, a year before Unforgiven.
Yeah,
his sense of who to pop in there, and I'm sure it was Martin rather than Mick Jackson, because Mick Jackson wouldn't know who half of those people are, and the sense that everybody is just doing it because this opportunity may not come again. You may not get to make Steve Martin's dream project, and so why wouldn't you say yes?
Yeah.
But it's full of talented people who just clearly are enjoying themselves.
Just
like John Lithgow.
We'll do anything.
In the deleted scenes, right?
Well, no, I didn't even see the deleted
he plays
scenes.
Harry Zell.
Who does?
John Lithgow, who's cut from the film in the end, but he's the guy, he's the sort of the specter.
Is he the agent that flies down in a rocket pack in that deleted scene?
Yes, because you don't see him. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
They talk about him at the, I think in the coffee scene, at the restaurant scene.
Yeah.
He's mentioned a few times. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, yep, this guy, of course he's in it. Why wouldn't he be? Everybody wants to be in this movie.
That scene with Patrick Stewart, the lead EO scene. I mean, I still reference that with my wife because that is just truly what it is to make a reservation in a nice restaurant. and I love that you have to go there to improve and show your bank account. I love that scene so much. Yeah. But really, I mean, the thing to me that just stays with me is honestly, weirdly, what Mick Jackson, I guess, did in this movie. I mean, this scene, and I'm sure Steve Martin had a hand in it, but to think of a scene where they're just walking through a garden holding hands, and then they turn into children, and then these stone sculptures of lions sort of bow down before them. Yeah. And then, in the next scene, there's a fart joke. Like that kind of mix really, goddamn, I can't believe it happened. Yeah. And it really, I think when I started writing in earnest, it really made me believe in the possibility of. Because the only kind of comedy that I do well, if I do it at all, is characters completely believing in what they're saying and doing, and not having any idea that it's objectively hilarious. Right. And finding a way to mix us being able to laugh at them and love them is that sort of perfect recipe, and for what I can do. Because most of the time I'm pretty earnest. And my friends who know me laugh at me because of what I'm saying, and I'm like, no, but you don't get it. Like, but they do, and that's what's funny to them about me. And so, there was something about this movie that really forged that, and made me kind of believe in the absolute just ridiculousness of who we are as human beings. Going around espousing our views and how preposterous we all are, and yet we all just want the same things and are looking for something simple.
Was it Billy Wilder? Somebody said that I think it was about Baxter in the apartment. Is that desperation is the extension of desire, and that's why it's funny. Because if you really want something, you really want it, and eventually you want it more than anybody else does, and everyone else thinks you're crazy. Yeah. Like, you become a loon because of your enthusiasm, because of your intensity in trying to articulate what you want. And in what you were saying about the garden scene being followed by a fart joke, it's like, to me, that has always been like that contradiction.
Yeah.
It's not even a contradiction. It's just
not. You're right.
It's
But it
just
would
a
seem
flow,
like it.
right?
Yeah.
That is what happens when you like. That's what I mean about smart people being thrown for a loop by their own emotions, because you fall in love and the rest of your world is the same. You still go to work. You still have a build from, like the stuff on your desk from the day before you met this woman or this man.
Right.
But
there's this humming little light somewhere.
Nothing has changed and everything has changed.
Yeah.
And so the rest of the world is still going to be mundane and distracting and not interested in, like Harris Telemacher, having met the woman of his dreams, still has to talk about the stupid weather that isn't changing. Right? Like the world literally doesn't change.
Yeah.
But he's different.
The film, Mommy, what was it? Slice Up Mommy. Like, yes. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, exactly. The world is still just as banal and empty, except that everything now has meaning because he feels he has purpose, and that's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful to see someone get it, because that's what novels are for. That's what poetry and sonnets and things are for, to articulate how everything is different.
And is it because is that what makes it seem like a first novel to you?
I think so.
That because it's kind of wide-eyed and ready sort of it's a little wide-eyed.
It's wide-eyed, but it's also packed with things that he wanted to share. Like that's the thing about the first novel. Like you write everything because you may never get another shot.
I think it actually, in some ways, is his first novel, even though it's not a novel. Because after that, that's when he really started churning out Pure Drivel, and then Shop Girl, and his play Picasso with the
Panagile.
But I think this was his first real piece of writing.
It's like his declaration. Cruel Shoes had been out. Like the book Cruel Shoes was published in the 70s. It was his first collection of short fiction. Okay. But there are a couple of... there's nothing in it that's serious. It's all very absurdist.
His comedy in the 70s.
Yeah, and it's great. It's a fun read.
Yeah.
But
Pure Drivel is absurdist too, but I love it.
Yeah, Pure Drivel is where there's a little more weight to it. Like he's being absurd about things that matter. Mm-hmm. Cruel Shoes the title story is about a woman who goes shoe shopping and can't find anything she likes until they bring out the cruel shoes, which just mutilate her feet, but she loves them because it's just the extension of the joke about women buying shoes that hurt.
Yeah.
But it's really horrible. The descriptions are very, very brutal and violent.
Yeah.
But it's like he was trying not to show too much of him. Or
no, I know exactly where you're going.
Like his sense of humor is in there, but he doesn't want to talk about anything important.
That's what his comedy was like a little bit. Yeah, he's trying to hide himself a little bit.
Yeah, and with L.A. Story, he just opens himself up and says, I'm a romantic.
Yeah.
And sells it and plays it. Because I suspect it would have been very easy for him to let someone else play it if he hadn't believed in it. Like he would have...
Of course, yeah. But I can't ever imagine that. But yes. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it has to be him.
100%.
Because that's the truth of it.
Yeah.
But I could also see him maybe just panicking and not doing it himself.
It must. I've never even thought about it because I've just lived with the movie for so long. But it must have been a very vulnerable spot,
right?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, Father of the Bride kind of teed up an earnest version of him.
Yeah, but it's weightless. Right? Father of the Bride is. Yeah. I think was it Ebert or Cale? Somebody I've never forgotten this. The review that says that we're watching people say, "Oh well, we can just afford $100,000." It's like, why do I care about you?
And then Nancy Myers is like, "Huh."
Yeah, the kitchen should be
the kitchen should be under that, exactly.
Yeah.
But he must have felt very vulnerable, I wonder, when he created this.
Mm-hmm.
And put it out in the world.
Yeah, he'd made Parenthood with Ron Howard. He'd played a dad already. Like he played suburban. He'd normalized himself, I guess, and over the course of the 80s he goes from playing really broad, really
it's not Lonely Guy anymore. It's not like The Man with Two Brains.
Although Lonely Guy weirdly feels closest to LA Story.
It's so absurd though.
Yeah, but it's the improv.
LA Story is absurd. What?
The improvised stuff between him and Grodin feels like the groundwork for this.
Okay.
It feels like people talking about mundane things and making it charming and funny.
I should revisit that now.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah,
because the improv and the broader stuff don't fit at all.
Yeah.
But the improv stuff, I think it was the first time I really understood what improvisation was as a moviegoer.
Yeah,
this would have been 83, I think.
Yeah,
just before Beverly Hills Cop, which is clearly just chunks of improvisation. But I remember seeing it and thinking, oh, this is a totally different kind of comedy. I've never experienced it before. And then a couple of years later, I got into Cassavetes, and you really see it.
Oh my God, yeah.
But what what Martin and Grodin do in that movie is, like, there's realism that the film doesn't know what to do with. It's really fascinating.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna rewatch it.
And unfortunately, because it's supposed to be a love story, like, it's not interesting.
Yeah.
It's a distraction from the main plot. So
It
the
just
film
fails.
is just like, get past it. But yeah, when they're just sitting together talking and not talking about anything, it feels like you can see the wheels turning that are going to eventually produce LA Story.
But LA Story to me feels completely written. Like, I don't think a line of this was improvised. I can't imagine. Can you?
I expect not.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
those
feels-
jokes are so precise.
There really is some precision to it. Yeah, and it's funny because in so doing, like, I walk away from a movie because I told you I was thinking about doing another film, and I walk away from a movie that I love, and I'm not really I'm not really in awe of the writing, though I'm very, like, impressed with it. But it's not something where I can point to one scene of the writing. It's really just kind of the feeling of the movie. Yeah, it did feel it feels to be critical of it. It feels very written and yet very real, but it doesn't. There's nothing that jumps out of the movie as an incredibly written scene. There are all these little sketches.
It doesn't feel... Yeah, it feels written, but it doesn't feel rigid.
Not at all,
Like,
not at all.
There's life in it.
There's life in it, you're right. I'm not trying to... But I think there's something about it that maybe there's no real scenes. It's a lot of sketches of scenes. Like, and there's no, like, very... Like, I love the scene where he goes up to her at the end when she's rejected. Victoria Tennant doesn't want anything to do with him. She's found out that he's with Sarah Jessica Parker at the end of the movie. And he does the thing that movies do, where he's like, I'll read you a poem. I'm going to read you a poem. Like, what do you want me to do? I can say anything, and then I'm just like, I just imagine what I said to you is the most beautiful thing you've ever heard, and it's just, I reached down your throat and I squeezed your heart. Like, I love that he does that, but that's not even, like, there is no... Wow, it's interesting. I've never thought of it. As a movie that feels very real, there is no scene that's just striking in how real it is, showing two people interacting, like many movies I love that are about love stories. There really is none of that, even though it gets at something larger that I think it achieves.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. It's I was just thinking that this film finds room for the Pointy Birds poem, which I have always thought...
Oh, pointy.
Which is, and it's such a great joke.
Yeah, it's a great joke.
You know that he came up with it 15 years ago, and he's never found a place for it, and here it is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel... Like, when it happens, it is... I
That's a great example of some, like, it's patently absurd.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite moment in the film
It's
because
genius.
you are on the edge of your seat to see the second, to hear that next line,
Yeah.
and it can only be one thing. And it's so stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, the
that's-
poem is so bad.
Yeah.
But it is also beautiful, and I don't think it's ever gone from my heart. I just, like, every now and then I will just, it'll pop up in my brain and go, oh, pointy birds, oh, pointy. And he delivers it with such seriousness.
That's what I was going to say. Is like that's a perfect example of the patently absurd behavior of someone taking themselves seriously.
Yeah.
Why we laugh out loud at them while they're completely laying out their heart for someone. That's a great example of it.
Yeah, because it's the worst poem ever written.
It's terrible.
And
but
he clearly holds it with such...
so good.
It's sacred to him.
Yeah. But I also love a character at the end of a love story where someone is about to make a grand statement to get them to come back. Says, listen, I don't have a grand statement, but I could make one. And if you just gave me enough time, like, just imagine what it would have done to you if I made this grand statement that changed your life, and then you would have seen me in a different light, and we'd see all this in a different light, and we'd go off and we'd be happy together. Like, so just imagine that happened.
Yeah.
It's just like, I love that.
The desperation of hanging a lantern at that point.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a great hanging the lantern.
You just need to.
Yeah.
Because Dan Harmon used to do that. I'm sure he still does. Writing Community, he would famously script things like Jeff's dialogue would be, this is the thing I need to say in this scene to get us to the next scene. And Britta responding like, oh, of course you'd say that sort of thing. That's the sort of thing you always say. And just placeholder it, and then eventually, like, on set, probably figure out what it needs to be.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And there's a documentary on one of the community boxes where he is shown to do it. Like, he actually describes it to the camera as he's doing it and says, I don't know why this works. I can't do this. This is terrible. This is hacky. But he does it.
Yeah.
Season 5, I think.
Okay.
It's like he's writing the finale while they're shooting it. And we watch that happen. And it's just like, holy shit.
Wow.
How would you ever admit to this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because everyone should do this. It's a great idea. But also, you have to be a genius to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, which he is.
Yeah, no question. But when Martin does it in L.A. Story, when Harris does it in L.A. Story, it feels like the desperation of somebody who really doesn't know what to do, and it's not phony, it's not forced, it's him being honest.
Yeah,
right? Like he's coming clean. I don't have it.
Yeah,
but I need you.
Yeah. Should we talk about Sarah Jessica Parker?
Yeah, when you mentioned her, it's like, yep, that's somebody else we didn't even think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Sandy is, again, it's a revelatory performance from someone who...
It really is.
Yeah, she was in Square Pegs, basically. That's how I knew her.
Yeah, and I knew her from Flight of the Navigator.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I was going to say she played a lot of sisters.
No, she wasn't a sister. She worked at NASA.
Yeah.
No, she wasn't a scientist. She was like a waitress. I mean, not a waitress, but I guess she cleaned up his room and brought him food and a giant robot.
Okay.
It was terrible. That movie's not good.
Yeah, I don't remember it at all.
Boy, I heard. Do you want to hear just a side note about that movie?
Please.
Okay, but no, my friend went to a party at Randall Kleiser's house, who did Grease and directed Flight of the Navigator.
And the Blue Lagoon. Yeah,
he's had a
fascinating career.
Summer Lovers, Twilight Time.
Yeah.
But he really has, and so at least at the time, this was about maybe 10 years ago. Randall Kleiser had the ship from Flight of the Navigator in his backyard, but because it was,
balsa wood, I'm assuming.
Balsa wood, yeah, no, it really was. It was rotten and had all these holes in it, and he was like, it was a terrible, terrible sight to see, like just sitting there, like the back of Miss Haversham's house, rotting in the back. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, it's a great statement on the film in a weird way. Like just this little sad, neglected thing that nobody really people like it more in their memory than
it's better. It's so much better in the memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But Sarah Jessica Parker in L.A. Story was like it's the color, the color world. Was it Bill Murray? Somebody said no, De Niro. I always attribute it to Mad Dog and Glory, but I'm wrong.
Great movie.
Yeah, totally overlooked at this point.
Yeah.
But De Niro said he was offered the role of the therapist, the Oliver Sacks character in Awakenings, but he wanted to play the patient. And his argument was, I want to be the color. Somebody else can do all the heavy lifting. I just want to be the one who people pay attention to and is interesting just because he's there.
Yeah.
And so ever since then, that stuck with me, the color role. And Sarah Jessica Parker is like, she's literally bright colors in this movie.
Bursting with colors.
Yeah. And she is doing stuff that she's never done since.
No.
Because I think she knows better than to repeat herself. But it's such an amazing, electric,
thoroughly thought out character.
Yeah. She's not a joke.
No, not at all.
She's
and
funny.
You could easily make that a joke.
Yeah. She's funny. But she's not an idiot.
She's intelligent. Yeah. In her own way.
Yeah, she's emotionally... The closest I could think of is Jennifer Jason Leigh in The Big Picture, the Christopher Guest movie.
But a little different. The artist. Yeah. She's an artist in that, right?
She's much more rhythmic.
Mm-hmm.
She's bouncing.
She's got an edge to her.
Yeah, and she's weird, and I think there's a line where she finally says, "No, I'm into ham radio performance art now," and it's just like, yeah, okay.
I wish that movie was better.
Yeah, it's so close.
It's very close. Go ahead.
But Sarah Jessica Parker finds a different way to be... She's not eccentric, but she is the kind of Los Angeles person who gets there because they can't be anywhere else. Like, that's the only environment where she makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny. When I first moved to LA, I was so terrified to move to LA in general. And then when I went to school in Austin, Texas, because I avoided LA.
Okay.
And then when I finally had to move to LA, I did, and I was vomiting the entire trip. I was so nervous, right? And I get there, and like, this isn't the reason why I didn't want to move to LA, but part of it, I was kind of dreading the, like, so-called, like, superficiality and kind of trivial nature that you hear about all the time, and, like, these sort of empty people and these very shallow lifestyles and blah, blah. And I as a heady 22-year-old, like, I was dreading that. And then I spent, like, a few months there, and this sounds condescending, and it's really not. In fact, I've probably become this. But But I realized, I was like, oh, it's not that everyone's shallow. It's just that, like, I always assumed they chose not to go deeper. Mm-hmm. But I was like, this is actually just as deep as they go, and that's cool. Like, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like you need to go down here for them. Like, it's okay. Like, we can just live here and be perfectly happy and whole individuals. And that's how I feel like Sandy is, like, the perfect example of that. Of just someone who is actually very intelligent in her own right and, like, has thought out her life choices in a lot of ways. And just hasn't chosen to be as angst-ridden, about her life and her choices as maybe someone else has. Yeah. And she's just okay with herself.
Yeah, she knows who she is. Yeah. She's probably the only person in the movie who really does.
Maybe Victoria Tennant. No, I think you're right. She's a little lost as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's how they end up falling in love with each other, because they're missing something. But Sandy, and Sandy will be okay without Harris.
100%. She'll be okay without the guy that she's with at the beginning and end.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's just so. It's like now.
What's her boyfriend's name? She's like, oh, he's right over there.
Oh, what is it?
I forget.
Yeah. It's a generic. I remember that. Like, it's not a distinctive name.
Yeah, and he's just got that ponytail and that long look. Go ahead.
Yeah, and he's going to be, a mid-range director and work for Max, and he'll be fine. I think, like, now it would be somebody from Broad City. Like, they would have to be somebody so neurotic, so like that we associate with tics and behaviors, and not that that's bad, but the New York energy would be wrong for.
I hear your
Sandy.
No one could replace what she did, though.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, don't think they thought they got. I bet when she showed up, they were blown away, and they exceeded every expectation they had of that character.
Yeah, it's got to be one of those things where the line readings make it. Like, like Cullen Tony on Galaxy Quest, and just redefines everything.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, you have this, and also people need to study you. Because she is the embodiment of Los Angeles. She's too young for him. Mm-hmm. She's sort of superficially fashionable in a way that nobody else is. She's following whatever else is trending, but it doesn't diminish her.
No,
she's just trending. Like, that's it. That's what she would be now.
Right.
She'd be an Instagram star.
Right.
And then that would be Ingrid Goes West in a whole different movie.
Right.
But a very different part of Los Angeles culture. Although I kind of see you see
a connection to her?
Now I'm seeing connections to Ellie Story everywhere. I think it'll prove to be more influential than we think.
Well, that's funny you say that, because I was a little self-conscious about it. I wanted to pick it because I think it's the first movie I chose for myself as something that I identified with, and I wanted to carry with me, like a piece of luggage, but a very light and feather light one, and then throw in the faces of people as I got older, and it really has informed me, and that's why I picked it. But on the other hand, I was very self-conscious about it because, like, let's say, unlike another movie that I consider, Joe vs. the Volcano, there's like zero cult following around LA Story.
Yeah.
No one really talks about it. When I do bring it up, some people are like, oh yeah, I like that movie, but like that's about the best I get. And most people don't even know what it is anymore, especially people younger than me.
Well, I think it's a casualty of its window, right? Like the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of films that were released by certain video labels just have gone out of print. And
Carolco. This is Carolco.
Yeah, and
Mario Kassar.
Yeah. But also it had the video rights were held by Live.
That's right. The first CD was Live.
Artisan, and now I think most of that stuff is like the Vestron titles are coming back now. But
I know, that's terrible.
Right, the junky stuff like Waxwork and all that, which I'm fond of.
No, I even bought a couple of those. Yeah.
Lair of the White Worm. That's one that I grabbed, and these are films that kind of they deserve another viewing. But I don't know that LA Story can be repackaged in the same way. Like,
these are genre movies. Like, everyone's eating up Z-grade genre movies on Blu-ray. But I don't think LA Stories.
How do you get people excited short of the Criterion Collection?
Right,
and then say you have to invest yourself in this.
That would honestly be the only game changer.
I think so. Yeah. And I'm sure they would love to get Steve Martin on board. A proper special edition.
Yeah, but what's interesting, I love your perspective on that, but I'm actually uncertain that the Criterion Collection would even like this movie.
That's what I mean. It would be a bigger hurdle. Although they did just do Lost in America, so maybe.
Well, Lost in America's kind of been seen as Albert Brooks' masterpiece for a long time, right?
Sure, but if you rediscover a Steve Martin masterpiece,
right? No, look, I like your optimism.
I think Shout would be interesting.
Yeah, but but do you think there's actually goodwill for the movie out there, or do you think it's just kind of a blind spot?
honestly, at this point, I think with Blu-ray, special editions, physical media, has gotten to the point now where if you pull a movie out of a hat, there will be 500 people who will be excited enough to justify it.
Does that matter? Yeah.
I think, well, the expectations are so low now.
I know.
So maybe that is all it takes. Like, maybe if enough people... I don't know. There must be enough of us. Like, I'm almost 50, and I would snap it up in a second.
Yeah.
You're younger, but
Well, I'm 38.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's still enough of a gap to suggest that there's another generation that grew up on
Sure.
it
Sure.
that would be interested. So I think so. Plus, like Steve Martin he's never really gone away. He's doing Broadway stuff now, but he's still culturally as
relevant
as he was 10 years ago.
At least.
I mean, he's not selling out
He's not what he used
stadiums anymore,
Yeah.
but he's on the talk show circuit. He's still around.
Right.
I think there's hope.
No, I picked the movie because I didn't want to pick a movie that Blade Runner is my favorite movie. What can I say about Blade Runner that hasn't been said a million times?
Sure.
No one talks about this movie. I would love to talk about it, but then suddenly when I was given the opportunity to talk about it, I was self-conscious because I was like, why is no one talking about this? Like it was an interesting thought to go through and then be like, whatever, this is the movie I love and warts and all.
That's the point, though. I mean, it's not the most obscure film that someone's brought to the show.
Not at all.
It's a mainstream, popular, successful comedy. It fits in the rom-com genre.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, I would hold it up to something like Notting Hill as an example of, again, the sort of the intelligent, colorful, busy romantic comedy that is also about something.
I gotta say, there's just like the magic that movie tries to generate with Elton John somehow works for me so much more with Enya in this movie, of all things.
That's true. Yeah. And maybe it's simply because Elton John stuff is, in 1999, it's already cliched.
Yeah.
And Enya...
Yeah, it was already when it came out.
Yeah.
It's the worst part of that movie when it came out.
Yeah, that's true.
Go ahead.
That's fair.
But I like that movie quite a bit.
But Enya dropping in LA Story is the mood. Like, it's just telling you, no, we're doing this. We're going to be earnest and heartfelt and mystical. Like, it's just...
Right.
Like, she had her moment, and the film is part of it.
Right.
And it doesn't feel like a cynical appropriation of existing tracks.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting thing is it's very hard to make and it's a very gentle satire, but it's very hard to make a movie that tries to say something about a city and be satirical and also be there's just nothing cynical in the movie. Like, that's maybe part of why I've always loved it. There's like not a cynical bone in that movie.
Yeah, the characters are. Some of them are. But the movie is not at all.
It can show you cynical people to the end of the day, but I've never thought about that. There's not a cynical bone in that movie.
Yeah. And maybe now is the wrong time for it to be discovered.
Yeah, no, we say that.
We're in a miserable, cynical age where everything sucks and is awful all the time and or feels that way. And I don't know. I want to believe that there's a place. I mean, hell, Call Me By Your Name is as gentle as they come, and it was embraced.
Still haven't seen it.
It's very gentle.
Crime.
It's a film with almost no conflict.
Yeah.
And that is kind of surprising since it's about a gay romance in the early 80s in Europe.
Yeah.
But people love it, and who am I to deny people joy? I just sat there thinking, this is really calm as a love story goes. There's like LA Story has more agitation over the romance. It's got complications. It's got obstacles. It's got, I mean, they're comedy obstacles, but they're still they're real.
Yeah. Should we talk about the signpost briefly? We should talk about the little magical realism of the movie.
Yeah, and again, it's the kind of thing that sets the tone right off the bat.
Yeah.
This is a movie where these things happen, and it just sells it.
Yeah. It's such a strange touch. I mean, he saw that sign, which you don't see nearly as frequently as you do in the movie in real LA, but just that choice. God, I love it. And I love that scene where the signpost controls her car, like where it literally like opens the doors and starts to draw the car down the street, and then he tries to force her back in. He's got the her back bumper like still in his hand, and like she's threatened by it, and then and then the doors close and they're just being driven by the post back to the sign. I love that. I love that scene.
Yeah, it's just that one. It's that again, it's the articulation of the feeling that the universe wants this to happen.
Yeah.
And to see that it literally does, or at least certain parts of it. And the idea that the infrastructure of a city has a say in stuff is really sweet. And it's just, that's it though, right? Like, it's a lovely little grace note. And the movie would probably not be any different without it. Not really. Everything else, like, if that was
the action of the movie.
Yeah, but if that was the only element that wasn't there, he would still meet her, these things would still happen. But I'm glad it's there. Because it's a signature. It's an authorial moment where it's just like, no, I can do this, and I can make it work.
Well, I think you need it, honestly, because you need a source of magic. Like, if you didn't have it, then the tone somehow wouldn't work because it wouldn't be anchored to anything. Even though it's a strange choice to anchor it, you need that visual to anchor, like, what the magic's come from.
Right.
Even if it's really not come from that.
But yeah, it's like a totem.
Absolutely.
It gives us a thing to see.
Yeah.
To understand.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. God knows what he's doing. he just does. I mean, I have met Steve Martin exactly once. I interviewed
Did you?
him. Yeah.
What can you tell me about it?
In Boston in '92 for the House Sitter junket.
Oh God!
And
I saw that movie I don't know why I liked that movie as a kid. It is not good.
Probably because it was on TV all the time.
Yeah.
But it's not good.
Nope.
It's and I would say it is
same time period, like 1 year later.
92. Yeah. But it is the definition of a problematic 90s comedy.
Is it? I'm trying to think now.
It does not like women very much at all.
Ooh, really? Frank Oz directed?
Yeah. And Frank Oz was... he's just doing a favor for Steve, clearly. Like, nobody really... You get the feeling nobody really cared about the movie. It's just a contractual thing, studio picture. But the chance to talk to him was... sadly, we were not one-on-one. It was me and 7 or 8 other journalists, and the conversations were going pretty... like, you know, if you've done a junket, you just know what it's like. The questions fly from every direction, and nobody wants to ask anything of weight.
Yep.
And because the movie is effectively about a stalker, even though I don't think we had the word for it then, we got to talk about that a little. It's just like, well, you're a celebrity. You must deal with weirdos. Like, this is obviously a worst-case scenario, but what, if anything, did you bring? And he was totally willing to talk about it. He was saying, well, you know... you want to believe that most people are very enthusiastic, and they like you because you represent something that they connect to, and then eventually you get a letter that's been written or dipped in blood, which I have gotten.
This is what he said.
Yeah. And he was incredibly graceful. He's also much bigger than I expected. Yeah, he's
taller,
built like a dancer.
Not expected
because he's a dancer. Right?
Okay.
Have you ever seen the specials he's done?
No.
Again, Shout Factory put out a box of his TV specials.
That's right.
There's one where he does a tap duet with Gregory Hines, and it is
extraordinary,
jaw-dropping. He holds his own against Gregory Hines.
Do something.
Yeah, but I guess he's 6'2" or 6'3", and he's broad. He's really built, or he was in '92. He was built like an acrobat. And it was just really shocking because you can sort of get a hint of it. There's like. The thing I always come back to, the scene in The Jerk where he's naked and holding the dog over his crotch, you get a sense of how tall he is. But he's stooping and he's sort of moving in a weird way, but you can see like the muscles in his body are moving because he's naked, and it's like, wow, he's like, it's not a guy who works out, but he's a guy who does something to stay in shape.
Right.
And then to meet him 10 years after, 15 years later, and it's just like, oh no, you're still keeping it up. That's really something. But it all goes like, it all gets pushed down in LA Story. He's playing a small person, or someone who sees himself as small.
He does play someone who sees himself as small.
And
they both see themselves as small.
Yeah, and that's how we get to the kids. Like, that's how we get to the innocence of it all. Yeah. It's about him looking for something that's missing, and it turns out what's missing is hope. And it's just, again, it's so pure that it was really shocking to see that from the guy who made The Man with Two Brains not that long ago. And did...
And Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
That's right.
Great movie, but still very different.
And the virtuoso cameo in Little Shop, where like, again, just you laugh until you black out, basically.
Yeah.
He just went for it. He went for everything, and then he made this movie, and he went for emotion, and it's weird that he's never done it since.
Well, no, he tried with Shop Girl, which I liked the novella, but the movie did not work at all. And in fact, it really shines a light on. It tries to make you believe in the thing that he's making fun of in LA Story.
Yeah.
Even though it's aware, in Shop Girl, obviously, but it wants you to believe in it a little bit or sympathize with it. And it's what a strange step to go to after that, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I wonder if maybe it's just the distance of time, like 10 years later, and he's retreated into his version of himself now. Like, the book, I think it could have worked if he hadn't played that role.
Yeah.
In Shop Girl, if it had been, like, Bill Murray could have done it.
Maybe.
Right around that time.
Maybe.
Like, you'd believe it, maybe more.
It was all directed,
sadness,
the tone of it was like, was tilted a little off. I think maybe if the direction had been slightly different. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, the book just doesn't care so much about that character, and then because Steve Martin is playing it in his adaptation of his own book,
that's true.
He's filling it more.
Because I remember liking the book a little bit.
Yeah, the book is. I mean, it's slight, but it's a good character study, and it sees the characters clearly.
Yeah,
and I think it knows that his character is more of a ghost in his own life than Steve Martin wants to be in a movie. So when he plays the role, it just automatically, even though he didn't direct it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it just sort of tilts it.
Yeah,
and. I don't know. I think that was where I started thinking that self-awareness is something that changes in an artist, obviously, shifts and grows, and I think if he'd thought about it a little more, he probably wouldn't have cast himself.
Yeah.
But maybe that's how you get the movie made.
It could be. But it's interesting. It really makes me think of Cameron Crowe, who's someone else who's always been a little earnest, sure. and who I in my young life really aspired to be and looked up to, whose version of himself has done this complete 180, and I don't understand anything or his views on the world or love anymore in the least, nor do I think he understands anything about the world and love. And that's not fair, but like I don't know what's happened, but it's like he somehow evolved from the thing we all loved and respected into some sort of parody of what he was doing.
Well, Aloha was... I mean, that movie could only be made by someone who isn't, like, taking notes or questioning himself or editing himself. It's the kind of... Yeah, it's... Oh, who said it? It was somebody said it... This is my worst quality, is like I can pull these lines out, but I can't.
It's okay. I'm liking it all. So
somebody said it about Kubrick about Eyes Wide Shut. It's the movie made by a man who hasn't left his house in 20 years.
Still love that movie.
He thinks this is how people act.
That's totally fair. But that to me fascinates me in the way that a pure bad movie, which I don't think that's a bad movie, but a pure bad movie is worth watching because it comes from one singular point of view.
Sure.
And like that had such a singular point of view, as wrong-headed as it may be, that it's hypnotic.
Yeah, no, Eyes Wide Shut is fascinating.
Yeah.
But it's like Aloha is...
An incorrect sort of, you're saying, approximation of human behavior.
Yeah, right. It's hermetic.
100%.
It's the idea that you know people better than people know people.
Yeah.
And you don't need to do the research. You don't need to think about...
Yeah.
You know, I get the sense that he had a note card on his wall for 40 years that just said New York Sex Party. And eventually found the dream novel that became Eyes Wide Shut and was like, oh, this is where I can put it.
Yeah.
And with Aloha, just the idea that you can make that movie and cast those people and just do nothing with anybody.
Yeah.
And then have a film that ends where your music collection blows up a satellite and what? I just, while I was watching it, I was trying to figure out if I was having a psychotic break.
And there used to be Hawaiian Gods in the movie.
Right, right. I heard about that.
But even like, because that is the most outlandish example, but even something like Elizabethtown, which I'll even defend Vanilla Sky, but even something like Elizabethtown feels like a bad version of Killing Zoe trying to ape what Quentin Tarantino used to do. It's like this bad impression artist of a thing that Cameron Crowe used to do so well. And I guess I bring that up because I'm not saying I want him to do it again.
Oh yeah,
and I don't think he can't. I mean, I do think he can. But I think as someone who writes, I become terrified of that happening, and so I always want to like try to figure out what it is that made Steve Martin. If it is just the simple idea that he had to cast himself in Shop Girl to get it made, why didn't he have the good sense to maybe shrink his role?
Right.
You know,
yeah.
Or in the more extreme example of Cameron Crowe, how did he lose his North Star?
Yeah, I wonder if it isn't simply that success breeds confidence and confidence changes the process.
Yeah.
That you you make
and
Almost...
no one tells you.
Yeah,
No.
you make Almost Famous, and you're the guy who made Almost Famous.
Yeah.
And you took a huge leap there, and so here's a big leap that I think I can make. And it turns out to be the original version of Elizabethtown, which was a nightmare. I mean, it really... we saw it, and...
Oh, you saw an earlier version?
Yeah, it was screened at TIFF, and...
Oh my God.
We were told immediately after the screening ended that it's not finished.
Not before.
Yeah, not before. And if we'd known, it was finished.
How different was it?
Credits, music.
Yeah.
It was longer.
I mean, it was not good, but what I saw, so tell me.
The road trip was longer.
Wow.
There was way more about the shoes.
Okay.
The ending, his career is rescued because the shoes make a noise that sounds like, that people decide sounds like an angel.
Oh, God.
And so they become collectibles, and his career is restored. And yeah, I mean, it's hazy because again, I was watching a lot of it.
Was it worse or better?
It was worse. It was worse. It was like watching. It was just like watching a guy bang his head into a wall without knowing it. It was like watching someone. I got it. I got this door. I can open this, and just opening the door into his own face over and over again because it's just you're sitting there going, it's the Simpsons joke, right? Please stop. He's already dead.
Right. And this is all connected to and not connected to it all, so we can stop talking if you like. But I'll do anything. So
right,
James L. Brooks.
Yeah.
So I just got the opportunity to see the musical cut.
Oh my God.
Right. There's a video store in LA that has it for rent, but you can't pay for it. So you have to go. They don't have it on display, so you have to go and ask at the front desk. They'll give it to you for free.
What is it? Is it a DVD?
It's a DVD, and it's a work print with all the musical numbers intact.
I feel like we shouldn't even release this part of the conversation because someone will swoop in and take it away.
No, they don't know what store.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
it's how many video stores are left?
True, but they'll have to figure it out.
Okay. And did you watch it?
100%.
And these are the songs that Prince wrote. Right?
These are songs that Prince wrote that Twyla Tharp choreographed.
That only survive now to the general public. The only thing we have seen of them, there's a shot in the making of on the Laserdisc. I think it made it onto the DVD.
Okay.
A camera panning by a bunch of people dancing. That's as close as anyone else has ever come to seeing these things.
I haven't seen that shot. First of all, everyone should see it who's interested in sort of filmmaking and also interesting in some, like James L. Brooks is a great example. Terms of Endearment is one of the best scripts I've ever read in my entire life. The movie's great. The script is 100% better. It is a flawless script.
Yeah, and I've read the book. It's a radical departure.
Is it?
It's
I've never read the book.
The book's great, but it's much more.
It's McMurtry, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
It's much more serious.
Yeah.
It's observational. It's not a comedy.
Yeah,
I'll put it that way.
Well, no, and this in Terms of Endearment and it's not written as a comedy. Obviously, I mean it's written as like the movie, but it believes in the characters and it's just. It's great. And so he is such a great observer of human behavior. Broadcast news is a masterpiece. And then you go into... So then you said what was it? The confidence of what?
Oh, success.
Confidence, success. Yeah. So...
Or creative ossification, I suppose you could say.
I'll do anything is if nothing if not ambitious.
Yeah.
A musical satire. Obviously the Player helped. But a musical satire of Hollywood. And... more specifically of making a movie and the test screening process and how movies get made and how the sausage gets made. And it's so wrong-headed but you can't help but be fascinated by watching this, knowing that James L. Brooks, who is in my mind a genius, did this and committed tens of millions of dollars and convinced Prince and convinced Twyla Tharp and convinced Nick Nolte to do it and to dance and sing, and all these things to for all the wrong reasons, to say nothing interesting or original, and that's what's really fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. And LA Story is something that, like Broadcast News and like Terms of Endearment, really has something to say, and I love, and I think it really achieves it miraculously. And then, the Shop Girl took me on a real interesting turn.
No, it's fascinating stuff.
The trajectory of a career is really something that I've always been obsessed with because I'm terrified of all those sort of pitfalls.
I can imagine.
Yeah, go ahead.
But the thing about I'll Do Anything that
you should see it.
I would love to.
If you come to LA, I'll tell you which videos.
Yes, please do. It's fascinating to me because I knew about the songs. Obviously, everybody did.
And some of it's
at the time.
great.
There
Some of it's kind of great.
the musical stuff.
Some of it.
Oh, wow.
Most of it's not.
But what fascinates me is that now it is the perfect example of how musicals work, even without the songs, because all the scenes build to an emotional crescendo that never happens.
Right.
So, because that's when the song starts.
Yeah.
Like when you can no longer speak, when
Yeah.
you can't convey your emotions, you start to sing. And so you have all of
like
these...
Blue Balls.
Yeah. You have all of these
yeah.
scenes that just don't end.
Yeah.
They stop,
Yeah.
but they don't end.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. I remember sitting there and watching it and thinking, oh, yeah, this is still a musical. It just doesn't have the songs in it
Yeah.
anymore. It's like almost getting into fourth gear, and then it stops. And you have to reset at the end of those scenes.
Yeah.
And wonder what happened.
Yeah.
Because there's a hole in it every 7-8 minutes. There's something missing.
Sounds like a Lars von Trier exercise.
Right? Like it's
Doesn't
an
it?
obstruction.
Yeah.
Make a musical
It
without
is.
music.
Have obstructions, yeah.
Oh, that would be monstrous. and it's because he doubted himself ultimately. Like I think releasing it with the music would have just. I mean, the film might have
That's
still
not
been a disaster. Well, it tested badly, right?
Yeah, well,
So
it's fascinating because it's a movie that almost hinges, at least in the first half, on a test screening process.
Right.
And there's a whole musical sequence about the test screening process. And it's also probably the only movie I've ever seen actually really nail what a test screening process is really like.
Okay.
Like, there's a great moment, which I think is in the final non-musical version, where all the audience...
Oh, the cards come back,
Feels the
right.
card. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And all the executives are surrounded, and there's just like, there's almost, I think a hold on them for almost like 45 seconds of silence as they're looking at the numbers, and then they're good, obviously, and they're like, the numbers never really mattered. You know, but like, after that, but it's great. But yeah, it was just, weirdly, it tested, the movie tested terribly, so they ripped it out, and they reshot a fair amount, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's like James L. Brooks bowing to test screenings strikes me as really weird. I mean, yes, he came up through television and there's a community process and all that.
Yeah.
But it's just like, that's when you say, I made Terms of Endearment. I have these Oscars.
Right. But he was correct. I mean,
Was he though?
Yeah,
Shouldn't he just taken the hit and released the musical version?
No, it was bad.
Really?
It's cringeworthy bad.
So it's worse than
It's worse.
the film is now.
It's definitely worse.
Oh.
But it has higher highs. It's like having a child. Like
Right.
when it's like life is so much better sometimes, but also so much worse. And these are very few and far between the highs that he achieved. No, he made the right choice. I think he absolutely shouldn't have released it.
Okay.
And I think even in interviews today, he doesn't regret it. Though he has hinted at releasing it.
I'd love to see it. I mean, like, that's the sort of thing that Criterion should put out, right? Because
Yeah.
if nothing else, you'd come away from it with a better understanding of how movies work.
It's very instructional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, I mean, it's just... I've I came up during the age I was reviewing the alternate cuts, like the when the Lawnmower Man added 40 minutes. That was a huge deal.
Yeah, me too.
Garbage movie, but
It is a garbage movie.
the longer version wasn't necessarily better.
Donnie Darko's a great example.
Donnie Darko is one
You
where
give the director you give him more money, and like he'll ruin his movie if he can achieve his vision.
Yeah,
he
I can
actually
explain
did better
this.
with the obstructions.
Don't explain it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there are a handful of films that are more interesting in special editions and uncut editions.
Well,
but
Alien 3 is a great example.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then there's Cameron does extended versions of everything except for Avatar.
Aliens was worse,
Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
not. I mean, it's still great, but
worse,
it's just
though.
it's just
I think.
it's flabbier. That's all.
You don't need to explain Newt's family, but yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's true. I love the smart gun sequence, and I'm just the nuts and bolts of
Trying to remember that.
setting them up. They're just the remote guns that fire on the aliens and explain why they haven't invaded for the middle hour.
Oh, okay.
It's fine. Well,
Yeah.
we don't need it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely unnecessary.
Yeah.
But it's just a moment of ingenuity where it's just like, oh, okay, this is the future, and there are other things.
Sure.
But it's like 3 minutes. It doesn't eat up the same amount of time that the stuff on LV-426 does at the beginning.
Right.
And yeah, that's unnecessary. I think that was just like, that's rightly cut because we know it's called Aliens. We know what they're getting into.
Yeah, I also just want Ripley to be the mother in my mind.
That's fair.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But yeah, no, I mean, the idea of alternate versions, and to bring it back to LA Story,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are other cuts, right? Because
Well, the trailer even has moments that are not. Did
Yeah.
you watch the trailer recently?
Yes, I did. And
Yeah.
like the John Lithgow stuff. There's another movie living out there somewhere in an edit bay.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, when you get into post, the most fascinating thing, and then to bring it back to LA Stories, is that a lesson that Judd Apatow, I think, has never learned since 40-Year-Old Virgin which is his best movie in theatrical version, because it's pure.
Tightest. Yeah.
It's tight. Like when the moment it came out on DVD and was released in a long version, I lost all air. I tried to show it to people and they laughed. And it's a great movie, but yeah, I mean it's a rhythm. Like you have to like keep all these balls in the air. And LA Story has so many balls in the air. I'm sure it's like a song, and you have to cut funny moments.
Yeah.
I mean, there are moments in that trailer that I love. I'm okay. I love the car phone moment. It's so stupid, but I love it. You know. But whatever rhythm they achieved, I don't want them to change a thing, except for the Mozart's ball joke. Balls joke.
You gotta have a joke about Mozart's balls to show culture.
Okay.
I think it's weird, like that would be a joke that it does. Yeah, it doesn't. Like it's just silly. It's unnecessary.
It's like too silly. And they like hit it with the musical sting.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's just a bit too much.
Yeah.
In a film where everything else is so precisely calibrated.
Yeah.
It just feels like that's the one where they go wide.
Right.
But there's nothing, there's nothing as simple and character based and funny and satisfying. There's nothing as good as I could never be a woman. I just stay at home and play with my breasts all day. Because it's ludicrous, but it sounds true. Yeah, it's right? True. Like it's just a moment of honesty from this guy.
Yeah.
And it's not. Like, it's still not gross. He says it with he's happy,
not at all.
Not creepy.
Yeah, not at all.
It's not sexist in a weird way. Yeah, it's like about enthusiastic
his friends don't react with any kind of revulsion at all. They're just like,
yeah,
that's you.
That's you, exactly. Yeah. It's him, and it's his, again, he's expressing an interest in something that is silly and weird, and so we get to laugh at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it knows him. And again, it's the thing that I keep coming back to about Steve Martin, is that he wrote a script about himself in a weird way that he'd never done before or since.
Which also, as a writer, is very hard to do without either falling into the Mary Sue of it all, where it's a flawless character and everyone else around them is learning that you have no flaws, or it's a character that you hate, because you have a lot of self-hatred that's like coming through. Like, it's very hard to write objectively about yourself. In fact, it's only possible to do so after you've written it and realize, oh, that's a lot about me. You can't to start out writing about yourself is I think one of the hardest things. Mm-hmm. I tried to do it one time, and it's kryptonite to me. I can't even pick up the first page. It is misery for me to even look at it. Yeah, and it's because the latter, not the former. But it's like all my flaws. I try to put all my flaws into someone, and it's just it's pretty bad. It's a very hard thing to do, and it's a really an amateur mistake that a lot of screenwriters make, is they try to put themselves into a script, which is the last thing you should do. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'm just trying to applaud that, because I think it's very hard to write yourself objectively and then write yourself into a character and then have fun with it. I mean, obviously it's not him, but
I wonder if
it's a lot of how he feels about life.
Right, and maybe the decision to write about the love story is what makes it work, because there's just enough distance. If you have to figure out why they're in love and who these people are, then they're slightly different from you and your wife.
To me,
maybe that's his way in.
Well, to me, my way in, if I were Steve Martin, if I'm going to pretend to be the genius that he is, my way in to make it work is actually figuring out the weatherman of it all.
Okay.
Like figuring out this weatherman who's just inherently absurd, his life, his lost kind of how he amuses himself each day. And that is not Steve Martin. Steve Martin works his ass off,
right.
Like is on movies all the time, is writing, is performing. He's not. I'm sure he's lost, like we all are in some ways, but he's not lost specifically in the way that Harris Tellenbacher is lost.
Sure. Yeah.
And then he's given him an entire identity that's not him, and then that is the prism through which I can start to put some things I believe in about the world and love. That would be my way in, as opposed to working backwards and retroactively to create the weatherman part, because that's so foreign to, I think, Steve Martin.
Yeah,
anyone.
That's true.
It's such a construct that then going through the construct and making it real is probably the better way.
He's created a role of someone whose job is the simplicity, boring, unchallenging, requires nothing of him.
Bored beyond belief.
Yeah,
Written
so
on
he
the
can
window.
fill his world with other stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, bored beyond belief. It's poetic in a way that it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But it's, again, it's the alliteration. It's the fact that it's the work of a smart person trying to amuse himself, trying to occupy himself.
Yeah.
Even his ennui is artful.
Yeah, well said.
He's too talented. So yes, so hopefully now we've at least got the snowball rolling and people will pay attention to the movie again.
Let's hope so.
I really want, I would hope that the feedback on this one is just going to be, oh, I haven't thought about that movie in forever. It's like, yeah, think about it. So is there, and we've sort of came up against it, but is there anything of LA Story that you've like deliberately used or unconsciously incorporated or spliced into your own creative DNA?
I mean, I yeah, of course. Spliced in my own DNA is that I I try not to take myself too seriously because I take myself too seriously.
Okay.
So so a lot of just knowing how, like, any story I tell about myself is usually a story that makes me look like an ass. Like, and I don't mean like an awful person. I just mean like a buffoon.
Right.
Like, those are my go-to stories, and that's my favorite kind of story about myself to tell. And then I just enjoy it. So the things about me that are absurd are the things that I like to tell people about the most. And I think those are the stories I like to tell about people. They're people whom I love and I care about, who are just patently absurd in their own individual ways. And they have no idea or objectivity about that, and that's okay, because we're going to enjoy being around them. You know, like, it's a very gentle way, but I mean, like, because... Yeah, but that's kind of how it's informed me as a person and as a writer. Because it took me a long time. I wrote very angsty things for many years, and I really saw myself as a dramatic writer. And you know, I worked with Alvin Sargent as his assistant for many years, and he's just a masterful screenwriter. And
Yeah.
I even wrote with him, and I co-wrote a screenplay. And I've written dramatic material. I'm not saying I'm above it or beneath it, but it was a real surprise to me that I could be funny, because I'm not a funny person, and it was in discovering that I could be funny in the way that I'm not really meaning to be funny, and then that's when I figured out the success, and that sort of all kind of comes from LA Story a little bit.
Just knowing yourself enough.
Knowing myself enough, but then also knowing characters enough, like, they don't know they're being funny.
Right.
That's the key, you know? Like, so, yeah, and like, so in Shazam, like, none of this is... hopefully should come off as a real joke. Like, it's a real serious situation to these people, but it's just inherently funny as a situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
My thanks to Henry Gayden, screenwriter of Shazam, which opens in theaters pretty much everywhere this Friday, April 5th. Thanks also to Daniela Saioni. She knows what she did. You can find Henry on Twitter at Henry Gayden, all one word, and you can find LA Story on a pretty nice 15th anniversary DVD from Lionsgate Home Entertainment. And as it turns out, since we recorded this episode, it's had a bit of a digital renaissance. If you're in the US, you can find it on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, and even Vudu. No movement in Canada, though, but you can find that DVD for $10 on Amazon. Also, Universal released The Lonely Guy on Blu-ray, and didn't tell anybody. It's delightful. You should check it out. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you feel like leaving a review on iTunes or Apple Podcast or wherever you enjoy the show, that would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps. It truly does. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.